recording. There you go. So you can see both me and the presentation. And then there's a little line in the center. And then what I want you to do is like drag that line to about the middle so that the presentation and me is about equal size, right? If you're on your phone, then this isn't possible. But if you're on a computer, you can do this. So this makes it easier for me to kind of just communicate with you, and you can see the cool slides as well at the same time, which is really rad. Okay, so this talk is called Monsters, Heroes, and Kings, right? Monsters, Heroes, and Kings. So Monsters, Heroes, and Kings is a leadership talk that I've done a couple of times, and it's sort of developed and grown over the years. It is a really freaking difficult talk. Like it's not easy. It's not simple. It's not like 5 tips for leadership and you'll love number 4, like Richard Branson, Musk, somebody loves number 5. Like it's not that at all. It's difficult and it's hard. So I need you to kind of commit and like dig into this content. And I'll stop every now and again just to like check in with everybody to see if you're on the same page and you're with me and you kind of understand how this is like all put together. So this talk is based on lots of different archetypes and myths and legends. So we have like, our world is filled with all these different archetypes. We have like really classic ones like the innocent child, or like the Temperance, or the old crone, or the wise wizard. So this talk, it actually explores those archetypes and those legends because they are filled with lessons for us. And these archetypes and things, they live in our imaginations and in our minds because they are so fundamentally true, which is why I love digging into them so much, because they teach us so much about what we are and who we are. So to start us off, this quote by Robert Coover, it's really fantastic. It says, "We need myths to get by. We need story. Otherwise, the tremendous randomness of experience overwhelms us." So archetypes, myths, legend stories gives us a structure so we can actually extrapolate meaning from our existence and from our world, right? So in this talk, the main thing that you need to kind of keep your head about, or keep your head on, is this dashboard, right? So this dashboard has got 4 stages, and these 4 stages are 4 stages that we find just in general in life, and we find them across like a ton of different spiritualities and a ton of different religions in all sorts of different ways. Some people talk about them as like 4 different animals, or 4 gospels even, or the 4 directions of the wind, the 4 seasons, and they all represent this journey that we all go through in life. So we're going to use this as a dashboard, and the main idea is that you locate yourself on this dashboard to see where you actually are on your journey. And because each stage has got like different invitations and like different challenges and things that you need to take into account. So the first one, before we get to the stages, I want to talk to you quick about monsters. So I love a good monster. Like we all love a good monster. We all have our different kind of favorites. So here's like a couple that I just really like. So the Curse of the Werewolf, and then there's a vampire. I think that was from the first like vampire movie called Nosferatu. And so what's so fascinating for me about monsters is that they exist because they are projections of our own fears, right? And they also exist like as these archetypes. So for example, werewolves are these creatures that are kind of very sort of normal and very calm. And then when the full moon is out, they fly into this complete rage and they kill, and they're just like this kind of very animalistic, just relying on reaction and lust and anger and like all these things. And and we all know people like this that seem like very calm and very easy. And then all of a sudden it's full moon and it's like bam, or like something triggers them and it's bam, it's like this rage. And then vampires. Like vampires live forever and then they suck the freaking life out of everybody around them. Like literally suck the blood out of everybody around them. So I mean, I can see a couple of people laughing on the screen, but like, how many vampires do you know? Like, how many vampires do you know? People that literally suck the life out of other people, right? So monsters are very, very real. So here's a couple of other ones that I like classic monsters. You got Frankenstein on the left there, and then Godzilla there on the right. But these also represent our fears. What's very interesting about Frankenstein is that that story came out during the Victorian age when people were really scared about technology's effect on the human soul. So it was like the time of the Industrial Revolution, and all these machines were starting to appear in these factories, and people were scared of what is this going to do to us. It sounds so familiar. Like whenever I read stories like Mary Shelley's stories and Frankenstein, especially, like it feels to me like it could have been written today, because we have this fear of machines, and this we have these questions about what does it mean to be conscious, what does intelligence mean, what does awareness mean, where does the limit lie between what God is supposed to do and what man can create, and all those kind of questions are all encapsulated in Frankenstein. Then on the right there you've got Godzilla, and Godzilla actually came about at the start of the atomic age, because he's got this atomic breath. And he represents really that fear that humanity had and still has to a certain extent about just like atomic war and worldwide kind of nuclear destruction. And then we have like classic, which is like making a big comeback, or has made a big comeback in the last decades, is zombies. Right? So who loves it, like a good zombie movie or a good zombie series? I actually watched that one with what's her name? Drew Barrymore. Did you see that? It's crazy. Like, she's this really good housewife, but she's also a zombie, and she like eats people. But anyway, so zombies are like these creatures that don't have brains, and they keep on eating other people's brains. It's like, if you think about your office, how many zombies are there? Like, people that no matter how many times you teach them something, they still don't get it. It doesn't matter how many times they're gonna eat brains and eat knowledge or whatever, but they still just don't get it. So zombies are very, very real. And I think our whole sort of obsession and everything with social media and the internet and all these kind of entertainment just being streamed at us all the time. It's also this kind of maybe our projection into zombies. So here's another one last monster. This one came out like last year. Does anybody know what this is? Like, it's in Stranger Things, right? If you've seen Stranger Things, a movie or the series. So Stranger Things talks about this monster or this being that lives underground, but it doesn't really have a name. You don't really know what it's about. You don't really know what it wants, and it's sort of infecting like a network into everything else. And when you think about this, you stand back and you look at it for a couple of seconds and just think about it. It's really, for me, like so representative of things like artificial intelligence, like the internet, like the powers that the big tech companies have, like Facebook, Google, Amazon, all these ones controlling all of this data and controlling everything kind of underneath, and nobody really knows what it's about or how it actually works. So all these monsters, the point I'm trying to make is like, all these monsters are actually projections of something that's like inside of ourselves. And monsters are very, very, very real. So we find them in stories kind of all the time. And monsters tend to show up in our childhood, right? So firstly, we get like the monster under the bed or the monster in the cupboard. It's like one of my favorite stories. And I always tell this when I do a keynote. It's like, so I'll tell it to you guys as well. Like, there's this little, like, it's like a little short story, and it goes like this. It says the boy was lying in his bed and he wanted to go to sleep, and he called his father and said, Dad, there's a monster under my bed. And the father came in and he said, oh, don't worry, I'll check. And the father checked underneath the bed, lifted up the covers, and then there under the bed was his boy saying to him, Dad, there's a monster on top of my bed. I love that. It's like such a freaking scary moment. Like it's a monster on top of my bed, one under my bed. So kids know monsters are real. And because monsters show up in our lives very early on and often in a very traumatic and very real way. And I just love this quote. It says, kids don't need to be told that monsters are real. They know monsters are real. They need to be told that monsters can be defeated. So we see this in stories all the time. We see the child that gets that gets sort of scarred by this monster and then goes on this call to adventure. And then in the next stage of life becomes the hero or it goes on this adventure. So we see narratives all the time. Like here's classic one, Luke Skywalker, right? So he sees in the beginning of the first film, which is actually the fourth film, like so Luke, his family gets destroyed completely and gets murdered, and then it forces him into this journey, into this adventure, and he sets out to battle like the Empire, and it's all fueled by this experience that he had as a child, where he experienced this like big monster. So, and then here's another one, Joan of Arc. She's one of my favorite heroes. And when I put this talk together for the first time, it was really tricky to find like fictional female heroes that are really cool. And so the only ones I could find were ones that were real, which I think maybe says something. So Joan of Arc, she like heeds the call. She feels that God calls her to help France or to help the King of France. And then she chases out the English forces from France all before she was like 17, which I just love because I always when I speak to high schools and so it's like, well, Joan of Arc rid France of the English before she was 17. What have you done this week? Just say, what have you done this week? She did that before she was 17. So answers the call, goes on this adventure. Alice in Wonderland. I love this film, like this particular version of it. It's like I just love the Alice in Wonderland story because that whole story is actually about growing up. It's about leaving the childish things behind and then taking responsibility to fight the monster. And then in the book, if you've read the book, it's all about her having to deliver this piece of poetry at her parents' garden party, and it's really about like growing up and going on this adventure in order to grow up. Then another classic, Frodo, right? He gets shoved into this adventure and then from his little normal world with this one mission to destroy the ring, to defeat Sauron. So this is kind of like the second stage of life, the second part of our dashboard. It's like this Euro stage. We have the child stage where we meet the monster for the first time. And then we have like the Euro stage, which is this stage. It's like where you get shoved into this adventure. There's a very specific mission, it's like this high energy kind of time of life where you want to like build big things, do big things, conquer the world, defeat the monster, like do all of that. So in mythology, there's like two characters or gods that show up in this time of life. The first one is Ares, the god of war. So what's really fascinating for me, if you read like ancient texts, if you had a problem with violence in your life, then the priests or whoever you would go to consult, the oracles, would tell you that Ares is making trouble in your life and that you need to bring Ares a sacrifice so that he can calm the hell down, right? So Ares is like the god of war. And here's what's interesting to me, like the word violence comes from the Latin word vis, and that word means life. Like violence is not, this may sound weird, but like violence is not inherently a bad thing. It's about life force, and it needs to be channeled and directed in a very specific and particular way. Otherwise it goes bad, and then you have a problem with Ares. And the other god that shows up in this time of life, like this Euro time of life, is Aphrodite. So she's like the female archetypal counterpart to Ares. So you've got the god of war, it's all about violence and like life force. And then you have Aphrodite, which is all about physical love and emotion and all of that. So here's the thing. If you have a teenager in your house, right? Or teenagers, you see Ares and Aphrodite all the time. Like they show up all the time. And if they aren't managed correctly, they can't be suppressed. Like that's what makes them, it makes them angry. So they need to be directed and channeled in like a proper way. So heroes are fantastic. Like, so this is like one part of the talk where, and I want you to get me wrong, like the hero stage of life is not a bad stage at all. It's like very necessary. We need heroes because they are the ones that head straight into battle. They are the ones that are at the front line. They are the ones that take big risks and like build new companies and like invent new things. They are the ones that they drive everything forward. The problem is that sometimes we get stuck, and we get stuck in a hero phase, and it goes actually too far. So I want to tell you a story. This guy his name is Bellerophon. So Bellerophon was the hero. He was titled, or his description was, the greatest hero and slayer of monsters. Don't you love it? Like that is just like the coolest name ever. Like, what do you do? Well, I'm the greatest hero and the slayer of monsters. Like you put that on a business card, it's freaking awesome. So he battled the Chimera, which is that lion, snake, goat thing as one with wings. So he battled that and killed it. And then he felt this massive surge of pride and I'm the awesomest and the greatest hero and slayer of monsters. And he decided, I'm going to go to Olympus on my horse, Pegasus, and then I am going to be a god, right? So he flew up with Pegasus and he flew up to Olympus, and Zeus saw him coming because he's Zeus. So Zeus saw him coming and then struck him down with a lightning bolt, as you do when you're Zeus. And Bellerophon was then the text reads that he was blind and he was wandering the earth despised by men. So like here's the takeaway from this story. Like the hero stage is great and awesome, and you are the greatest hero in the slayer of monsters. But if you take it too far, life will pay you back and draw you down. Like I love this line. It says, either you humble yourself or the world will do it for you. And that's the lesson between this thing. So yes, be the hero, but don't go all the way. Like remain humble and like stay that humble person, like direct it properly. Another story that has like a similar vein is like, remember this, Troy? I love that film. I've watched it like a million times. So Brad Pitt plays Achilles, so short skirt, like really great bum, like, and his mother, like she's a prophetess and she tells him the future. She says to him, if you stay in Larissa, you'll find peace. You'll find a wonderful woman and you will have sons and daughters who will have children and they'll all love you and remember your name. But when your children are dead and their children after them, your name will be forgotten. And then she says, if you go to Troy, glory will be yours. They will write stories about your victories, and for thousands of years, the world will remember your name. But if you go to Troy, you will never come back, for your glory walks hand in hand with your doom, and I shall never see you again. And like this is the pitfall for every hero. Like this is like the turning point, the point of crisis. Do you go ahead from this point and then chase what all heroes eventually start to chase? And that's like the three G's, like glory, gold, and girls, or glory, gold, and guys. I wish I could get like one word to like that, also a G that can fit into that last one. But like, so glory, gold, and girls. Like that's like the big three things that tend to make every single hero fall, right? And you see it in movies all the time. Remember this one? This is Wolf of Wall Street. And in the beginning of the film, if you remember the film, or I don't know if there's a book actually, but if you remember the film, like in the beginning, he starts out as this really good guy. Like, and he just wants to provide for his family. He wants to make a bit of money. And then it's just like, his life is like this downward spiral, and it's all this money and like sex and drugs and like all this craziness. And he becomes this massive hero, and then he falls. But like the thing that just gets me about that movie is like right at the end, he's still the same guy. Like he's still teaching people how to sell a pen. Like if you haven't seen the movie, then go and see it. or go and watch it. It's really interesting and good. It's quite, you have to like avert your eyes every now and again, but it's really like worthwhile watching. So he remains like almost like the eternal adolescent, chasing after the gold and the girls all the time, right? So there's stories from myths and legends that talk about this too. This this way where we get stuck within a certain identity. So this picture is of, on the right there is Heracles or Hercules, depending on which story you're reading. So what happens in this scene is his wife was kidnapped by the centaur, right? And then the centaur wanted to have his way with Heracles' wife, and he shot and killed the centaur, which is like this scene. So, and right before he died, the centaur spoke to the wife and said, "I'm really, really sorry that I kidnapped you and tried to have my way with you. Take my skin when I die, take my skin and take it as a prize back to your husband," right? Which is like freaky just to begin with, but stay with me. So, so when he dies, she cuts off the skin and she takes it to Heracles, and he is like so enamored with his killing the centaur and so proud of himself that he starts to wear the skin as a cloak. But what the centaur did, it was all a trap or trick. So the centaur's skin was actually poisoned, and it ate its way into Heracles' skin, so he couldn't take it off again. And this story is like such a brilliant metaphor for identity. Like when you over-identify with something so much that you put it on, that you can't even actually then eventually take it off again. Somebody once said that celebrity is like that. Like celebrity is it's a mask that eats into your face. So after a while, you've identified so much with the story of the hero that it's difficult to get away with it. And so to over-identify with anything sets up turf, which you then later have to defend. And that's the problem that most heroes have, is they over-identify with this hero status, and then they just can't move on and actually eventually look ridiculous. How's this one? The Superman on the crane is like my absolute best. Like, and like the Robin in the back with the short shorts. So if the hero continues down this path, it leads to self-destruction, like bigger and bigger, more and more, and all to try and silence those monsters. Remember the monsters? To try and silence those monsters from childhood. And those monsters have, by this point, have become very, very loud. The one writer says, by this time, food is tasteless and the wealth no longer brings any consolation. And people end up in this, what is called a pathological adolescence, meaning a sick adolescence that doesn't actually end, right? So a couple of politicians come to mind. I'm not going to name any names. But and what's interesting, like when you read in different stories and from the Middle Ages as well, there's a jester that always appears. Now, the jester was the truth teller in these stories, that he was the only one that was allowed to tell the king the truth. But more than that, there's a writer that writes, it says, the king needs a jester lest he looks inside himself, right? So, because inside himself, everything is a mess. So he doesn't want to look in there. So he needs some entertainment, some amusement. So, which takes the form of drugs, work, money, you name the addiction that normally happens at this point in life. So you don't want to look inside yourself. You'd rather actually just be entertained by whatever the jester is. So this is obviously a Rubicon. It's like the place where you need to make a choice. It's a place where a leader or any person in life actually needs to make a decision. And what's really interesting to me is Jung, the famous psychiatrist, he said that he refused to work with anyone before they've hit this point. Like he said that you've simply have not lived long enough and you haven't messed up enough times, so he can't work with you. So this is where we, in our faith community, where we take people on long retreats and on quests, and where those old monsters make their way back and they tend to kind of show up again. A friend of mine described this stage in life like this. He said, this is the stage in life, and maybe you can identify where you've been chasing this big thing, and maybe you've built this big organization or company or whatever, but now the fog descends and you're not sure kind of where to go anymore. The old things don't bring that kick anymore. And then you start hacking your way through the forest. You're in this forest and the fog descends. You start hacking your way through the forest. And every now and again, you get to a clearing and you think, oh, this is it. This is it. This must be the new thing, the thing that I must do. But they know. And you continue, and the cycle continues over and over and over until you find yourself eventually at the edge of a cliff. And then here you have a choice. You can either go back and try and find another clearing, or you can jump. And that's the crisis point. That's the thing we all need to face. So crisis, the word, comes from krinein, which means to separate, to decide, or to judge, or from the root kri, which means to sieve, like a sieve that you use to like sieve flour with. And this is like that point in a person's life. So here we're back at our dashboard, right? So we've got the child, and then we've got the hero. And then eventually the hero faces a crisis before he can move on to the next part. And this crisis is often from childhood, something that needs to be faced, a wound from the past. And it's at this point in our journey that often an elder shows up. So you see all the Gandalf sitting there on the right. So the elder shows up, and the elder sees where the hero is at this crossroads and then guides them towards growth. So it's like, it's in many kind of more traditional ancient communities, it would be the elders that would see that somebody is ready to transfer to the next stage, to cross over to the next stage, and they would help them. There's one narrative one story that Victor Turner, the anthropologist, actually writes, and he says it's where the chief calls out, he notices something in one of the adolescent boys, where the boy is starting to look at the girls and starting to flirt with the girls. And then he shouts out, "The boy must die." And then everybody freaks out, but it's not a real death, it's an initiation. And so he must die in order for him to be reborn, to get to the next stage. So we are not alone in our journeys. There are always elders to help us. I'll use this slide just in about every keynote because I love it so much. Nigel in the film, this is The Devil Wears Prada. And Nigel in the film actually gives Angie the Malone Blahniks that she needs and the Chanel that she needs to defeat the evil monster and then move on to the next stage of life. And that's the journey. So here's our journey just one more time. So I'm sure that everybody's on the same page. We have our child in the beginning, and then the child faces some sort of crisis or a monster, and which forces the child or pushes them to become a hero, to start to build, to start to conquer, to enter into that stage of life. Then that crisis point shows up again. It actually then manifests in one way or another in a hero's life. And then it's usually at this time that an elder shows up, a wise old wizard, a wise person that guides this person through that crisis point in order to become actually the king that they were sort of destined to be. Right. So just for a second, I just want to check that everybody's on the same page. So if you have a question or a comment, does this make sense? You can turn on your video there for a second. Like you can just go, yay, I'm up to speed. I know what's happening. I understand what this kind of framework is, right? Are you all with me? Hey, Tom, like me to see now. Hey, Richard. Okay, cool. Seems like everybody's on the same page. Like I've done this talk, like in the first couple of times I did it, people were so blown away, like so confused by this point. They were like, what is it, like hero, child, then king? Like, so I did this dashboard. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, cool. So if everybody's on the same page, this is it. Okay, let me just like put this down there again so we don't look at one another all the time. All right, so here's the thing. You need to, where do you find yourself on this like dashboard, on this thing? Like there's still chance. This is something I tell it to everyone, and there's always still time to kind of dig deep and like go into yourself to figure out where you are and where you need to go. And that's the whole point. I mean, that's what we try and do in Palestra, is try and look into ourselves, build an awareness of where we are on this journey of life, and then what do we need to actually move forward. And I use this quote. I love Maria Rilke. Just her poetry is incredible. This is just one little excerpt, and it reads, "You are not dead yet. It's not too late to open up your depths by plunging into them and drink in the life that reveals itself quietly there." I love that. And because I think we live in a society that gets stuck at the Euro stage, where we live in this, one writer called it a death-denying, youth-worshipping culture. Or the other writer said the pathological adolescence, that people just don't grow up. We stay in that Euro stage for the rest of our lives. And we see these fat, overweight, really pathetic Euros walking around that just don't have this purpose anymore, right? So the trick is to move on. In Greek thought, or Greek philosophy, there's a river in Hades. It's one of the 5 rivers in the underworld, and the one is called Lethe. It is also known as, get this, the river of unmindfulness. So the opposite of mindfulness. So Lethe flowed through the underworld, and everybody who drank from it experienced complete forgetfulness. So Lethe was also the name for the Greek spirit of forgetfulness and oblivion. And then it was this personification of forgetting your life, right? So the word reminds so much of the word lethargic. It's like something that we forget that we're summoned by each moment to make like these life-defining decisions. But we'd rather avoid responsibility and then just stay where we are. And then Plato wrote and says, "And those who were not saved by wisdom drank more than was necessary," because you're supposed to drink from the river when you died so that you will stop being sad by the life that you've lost. You kind of forget it. But some people drink more than is necessary. And we can almost, I like to kind of compare this to an addiction, where you drink way more than is necessary in order to forget all things and not move forward. So this story is about, this is all of us. This is our story. Like we fit into one of these characters. And this is our whole journey. And we all have to take responsibility for our own, Jung called it individualization, like our own growing up, becoming who you are created to be, like to become like the best version of yourself, the best leader, the best entrepreneur, and above all, just the best freaking human being. But in order to do that, we all have to face the monster, face the devil or Diablo, whatever you want to call it. So I want to tell you this story. And it's a classic kind of parable where a man came to a village, and he asked, there was a wise old woman sitting by the entrance to the village, as there usually is in stories like these. So there's a wise woman who sat there, and he came to the village and he said, "What are the people like in this village?" And the woman looked at him and said, "Well, what were the people like where you came from?" And he said, "Oh, they're awful. People are selfish and arrogant and annoying." And she said, "Well, I'm so sorry. They're the same here." And then not long after that, another man came to the village and saw the same old wise woman and asked her the same question. It's like, "I want to move here. What are the people like in this village?" And she looked at him and she said, "Well, what were they like where you came from?" And he said, "Oh, they were so great. They were kind and happy and compassionate." And the woman said, "Well, you're in luck. They're the same people. These people are exactly the same here." And the point of the story is it's not about the people, it's about what you see. Because whatever you see is actually just reflecting on the inside. And to understand that our insides are actually split apart, that both good and evil exists in every human being. And if the whole world can just get this, like we see outside what is inside, I think we'd live in a completely different society. Um, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, I can never pronounce his surname. he experienced the Russian gulags and wrote lots of beautiful stuff afterwards. So he said, the line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties. And we can say right now, nor between races, but right through every human heart. And that's the trick. And it's at this point where you have to realize that the monster is inside you. Like, you are the monster. And often when I've like done this talk, and it's at this point I've literally had people burst into tears. I was like, okay, the monster is inside you, and so is the king. Like, and that's the gift. That's where you need to go. That's where the battle needs to go, because we keep on directing the battle outside. Battle is not outside. The battle is inside. So we we have this practice in Palestra. It's called Let's Have Tea. I talked about it the last time as well, but Let's Have Tea practice is about sitting with your own demons, with your own pain, going, let's have tea. What can you teach me? What can you teach me about myself? How can I work with you to go through this? Because trying to run away from the monster doesn't actually work. You need to turn around and face it. And the moment you face the shadow, the moment you name it, it tends to dissipate and leaves you a gift. This cartoon was in the New Yorker not too long ago. And I love it. Like, this whole talk is this slide. Like, if you just remember this slide, then that's it. It's like a boy who wants to be a knight releasing a baby dragon into the wild. Right? Because that's the story. The thing that you have to fight right now is the thing that actually comes from the past. And where the elders, and I know many of you are long past even the king stage of life and into the elder stage of life, and elders have a responsibility to ask like really difficult questions. Questions like, what are you running from? What are you trying to drown in glory, gold, guys and girls? And like, here's the kicker. Like, this is probably like one of the best questions. I love a good question. But like, what are you unwilling to feel? Like, that will lead you into some really, really interesting and good places. Because there's a treasure that's hidden inside of the monster. The monster leaves a gift. In the story of the Minotaur, which is like this child devouring half man, half bull that lives in a labyrinth. There's like so many like lessons in this story that I use it so often when I do keynotes. But like the one lesson that's interesting, the Minotaur has a name in the myth. So his name was Asterion. And Asterion, the word means star. So in the monster is a star. If you look in the monster's eyes, you just might see a star. And where do you always find treasure in every single movie? At the dragon. I always use this slide too. Like, the dragon hides the treasure. And the invitation, or part of the invitation in this talk or this session, is like to go to where the monster is, because that's where the treasure is. So old Lady Gaga, Mother Monster, was right. Like, who knew? She was right. She said, you need to embrace your inner monster. Not exactly. You need to kill your inner monster, not become your inner monster. So there's a death that needs to happen. And your inner monster should be defeated. So death will happen. Here's like the kicker. What's so difficult about this talk or this idea is like, death will happen. It'll either happen by you choking yourself to death on your own achievement, or by heading into the abyss. And if you're lucky and you don't drug yourself further with success and work and addiction, you'll come to this realization that all outside you is completely useless. That like glory, gold, and girls will not fill the gap and will not drown the monster. It will only actually make it stronger. So you have to let it go, and you have to let your ambition die. So the lesson is always the same. The lesson, whether you're successful or whether you're a failure, the lesson is always the same. Let it go. So you have to bring sacrifices. Like human beings have long ago figured out that sacrifices work, right? To sacrifice something today secures a better future. Not eating all of the fruit today helps us to have fruit for tomorrow. Like sacrifice is a really amazing system. We've discovered this thousands of years ago. So the trick is that this sacrifice is not a sacrifice of something else. It's a sacrifice of yourself. It's like you have to sacrifice your own desires and your own way that you thought the world was working, and your own needs and own wants. That has to die, and that has to be sacrificed so that the future can be secured, so that something can happen. And we see this in every great story, right? The hero needs to enter into the dragon. Like this is Mount Doom, Lord of the Rings. Not just go to the mountain, go into the mountain. To drop the ring into the lava. That's the only way it can be destroyed, right? The hero needs to go into the dragon. You ever seen those movies where the hero eventually goes with the sword like straight into the dragon's mouth, and then from the inside of the dragon kills it? And that's like such a brilliant metaphor, because that's what needs to happen. Like, and I love that line in like Lord of the Rings where it goes, what's his name, the dwarf, Gimli, where Gimli goes, certainty of death, small chance of success. What are we waiting for? Like, that's it. Sacrifice. Sacrifice needs to happen for this thing, for you to move on. And it's in every movie. This is in in one of the Marvels, and I've forgotten which one it was. I think it was the first Avengers, second Avengers, where Iron Man sacrificed himself, right? And then he actually comes back and he's a nicer guy. Do you notice that? He's like a bit of a dick, like the first couple of movies. And then after this movie and after this scene, he comes back and he's different. And he's changed because he made the selfless choice to sacrifice himself, right? And then this, one of my absolute favorite movies, Big Hero 6. You seen it? Such a freaking cool movie. Like everybody needs to see it. It's like mandatory film watching, right? So the boy flies into the portal to save the villain's daughter, and then the robot sacrifices himself actually to let the boy live. And it's like the perfect metaphor. There's a Chinese story, which I love, one of the last stories I'll tell you. And it's called The Master and the Bamboo. And the master, who was the master of the garden, had this beautiful garden with these beautiful tall growing bamboo. And there was one particular bamboo was really tall and the most beautiful and the most straight of all the bamboos. And then the master walked up to the bamboo one day and said, I can use you. And then the bamboo replied, bamboo can talk in this story. I know it's a bit weird, but so bamboo can talk in this story. So, so the master walks up to the bamboo and says, I can use you. And the bamboo replies and says, use me, master, use me. I'm the best and the most beautiful and the tallest and the straightest bamboo. And then the next day, the master walked to the bamboo again and said, I can use you, but I need to cut you down. And then the bamboo said, no, you can't cut me down. I'm the most beautiful bamboo. And then eventually the bamboo said, no, it's fine. You can cut me down. And then the master came to the bamboo again the next day and said, I need to cut off all your leaves. And then the bamboo said, there's no way you can do this. You can't cut off all my leaves. They are my beauty, my crown. You can't do this. This is too much. And eventually said, well, if I can't cut off your leaves, I can't use you. And then bamboo said, okay, you can cut off my leaves. So he cut off all the leaves. And then the next day, the master came to the bamboo again, who was now lying on the ground with no leaves. And he said to the bamboo, I can use you, but I need to cut you in half and cut out your heart. And the bamboo said, I have nothing left. Please use me. And he cut the bamboo in half and cut out its heart, and then used the hollow bamboo to irrigate the fields and grow food for the village. That's the story. And that's our story. Like, and that's what needs to happen when you want to move from one stage, from the hero stage of life, to the king stage, to the next one. From that hero type of leadership to like the king type of leadership. And it's only like when the sacrifice is made, when the hero has died to herself, that she can enter into the next stage of life. It's only then that that can happen. And to become the king, only through death and sacrifice. And in this film, Black Panther, there's such a great, like the one brother goes through the self-sacrifice death, literally gets buried in the movie, like literally gets buried. When I saw that, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This is like the perfect archetype. Gets buried, meets his father who guides him to the next stage. I was like, dude, this is everybody's story. But the Shadow King or the other king, he doesn't actually go through that process properly. He doesn't die to self, and he becomes this horrid, horrid king, or the Shadow King or Shadow Hero. And but this is not new. It's nothing new. I found this quote by Socrates the other day. It says, "Aren't you ashamed to care so much about making all the money you can and advancing your reputation and prestige, while for truth and wisdom and improvement of your souls, you have no thought or care?" That's like 2,500 years ago. Nothing is new. So kings. Now we've arrived at the king stage in our story. Kings have a very, very specific role to play and a very specific thing to do. So heroes have audiences, right? A hero has an audience. They want to hear the applause and win the awards. Good kings give audiences, right? Heroes have audiences. Good kings give audiences. Kings, listen. They have this ability to hold paradox and to live in gray by not making a decision and just spending time listening to their people, their team, or whoever. One of the best books I've read on leadership is called The Contrarian's Guide to Leadership. I've forgotten the author's name now. It's slipped my mind. But like he also talks about this idea that good leaders can live in gray. They put off making a decision for as long as possible to hold that tension between the two. Another thing that kings do. So this was the emperor, the first emperor of China. So what's interesting about the way that the Chinese describe the emperor's role is like that he has the mandate of heaven, right? So in all kind of spirituality and mythology, heaven is a place of order. And then Hades or the underworld or hell is a place of disorder. And the emperor has the mandate of heaven. In other words, it's like if you look at it, it's like a triangle. So you've got the heaven at the top, and it goes down, meets where the king is, and then the king goes down again. It's almost like an hourglass, right? So the heaven, the order in the heavens, goes into the king, and it's his mandate to bring order for his people. Right? So the first Chinese emperor is actually a very good example of this. So he built the Great Wall, and to protect them against attackers, he unified all the tribes, and he created a language, like created a unified one language for everybody to speak. And that's what good kings do. Good kings bring order. And if you think about this idea between chaos and order, disorder and order, it's actually fascinating to me because so many times you see people that intentionally bring disorder. They feed off of chaos, and they tend to make it worse. It's often when you see like in liminal spaces, which we talked about previous time, like chaotic times, you'll find these characters that try to bring just destruction and chaos. It's almost like these kind of fake kings, like these jokers. The Joker character in Batman is such a brilliant example of that because he does that. He just wants to watch the world burn. But true kings and good kings bring order. And this next slide is a picture of, oh, there you go. Sorry, they're the wrong way around. This is in New York City, if you've ever been there, by the Chrysler Building. Sorry, I think one of my dogs is outside the door. This is a statue of Prometheus, right? So, and it's, I think it's in front of the Rockefeller Building, if I'm not mistaken. So what's interesting about it is that it was put up in the 1930s during the Great Depression, right? Where the Great Recession was. So the Prometheus was one of the characters in mythology, and he stole fire from the gods to give it to human beings, right? So to give them technology so that they can actually create a life. And then that inscription that you see at the back there, it actually reads this. It says, Prometheus, teacher in every art, brought the fire that have proved to mortals a means to mighty ends. So he steals fire from the gods and brings vitality, brings life. Like this is the second thing that a king does. First, you bring order, because there can be no life without order. Like there needs to be some order. And then you bring vitality and life. Give people the resources that they need to build the stuff. It's like you are the one that resources the heroes so that they can do what they need to do, right? And then one last thing about kings. Kings, traditionally, I know this is like very un-PC, but like kings have harems, right? So in every story, you have kings that have like lots of wives. And kings have children. Like a good king always has children. Like whenever you watch any of those movies, one of the biggest problems a king faces is when he doesn't have an heir. Now, this is also like attached for me to the whole idea of a king bringing life, like bringing vitality. A hero doesn't know what to do with a princess. Like he gets to the princess eventually, but he doesn't know what to do with her. Right? The movie always ends there, but the king knows what to do, because that's the role of a king, to bring forth life. So one last thing about kings that's very important to remember. There's a saying, which you may have heard in films or read in books, when a king passes away, or a queen, says, the king is dead, long live the king. Have you heard that? King is dead, long live the king. So this idea is that the kingship is actually something that's separate from the person. The energy of the king is not to be owned. It shouldn't become like the skin of the centaur. It should be like the person should be like a planet orbiting a sun, where the sun is the king's energy, this leadership energy. So, and in many cultures, like a king, if a king was a bad king, he would be ritually executed so that the king can move on to the next person. So good kings don't over-identify with the role. Leadership is a function. It's not something that's to be personified completely. So that's our dashboard again. So where are you on this journey? If you look at this on the screen in front of you, where are you? There's no good or bad place. The whole idea behind this is to kind of pinpoint yourself and say, I think I'm here. I think this is where what I'm facing right now. And then the question then is like, where are you in this journey, and are you stuck anywhere? Because there's a very particular invitation in each of these stages. And we focused on the hero and the king one now, but in each one there's one. So for children, at the child stage, there's a call. And it takes people a very, very long time to actually answer this call. Some people way into their 20s and 30s have yet to answer this call, right? The call to adventure, the call to leave, the archetypal mother, to leave parents emotionally, physically, financially. That's actually like the three requirements for being called an adult. Like there's like three things that you need to be able to do. Like you need to be away emotionally from your parents, away physically, and away financially, right? And if I look at my friends, and I'm in my 40s, like not all of them are actually adults yet, because they're either not physically away from their parents, or financially, or emotionally. That's like the three big things. So there's a call. And then to go to the next stage. And then the choice the hero has to make is sacrifice, to let go. So if you find yourself in this stage, and I think most people, like most adults, get to this stage at some point, or obviously get to this stage and then get stuck here. So this is why this talk focuses so much on like this one thing, because that's the place where I think most people get stuck. Like, what do you need to sacrifice? What do you need to give up? Maybe like it's a dream of something that you thought was going to happen, or that you wanted to build and it's not happening. Or maybe you've defined that you did build it and it is awesome and it is great, but now it doesn't give you that kick anymore, or it's actually starting to poison you. So what do you need to sacrifice? Then you have the king. the invitation for the king, if you're at this stage of life, then I want to applaud you, because I think few people make it here even. And it's service. And the invitation here is to bring order, vitality, to give audience, to affirm. The king also blesses, right? So kings knight other people, queens knight other people. They affirm them in their identity and who they are. Then they give the heroes what they need. Then the last one, the elder, the invitation here is wisdom. To stop, almost in a weird way, stop serving and stop working, but to act as a guide for kings and for heroes, especially when they face that crisis. So where are you on this map? Are you stuck anywhere? And then what is the next invitation? What is the crisis point that you're facing? Like, that's the question. What are you being invited into? That's the question I want to leave you with today. So I want to open it up for questions, comments before we finish. And if anybody has something that they want to add, or they think like this is really important, I want to talk about this more. Maybe there's a question, something that's really good or not good. 4 o'clock on the dot. Do you need to go? Okay, cool. If you need to go, that's fine. Then you can go. I know we're 4 o'clock on the dot, so we finished nicely. So it's really awesome. Thank you all for attending and coming in. Hey, Yaku.
Yes, yeah, Pierre, sorry for being late. My meeting ran long.
Yaku, do you have a question?
Yeah, no, I can just, the only thing I just want to say that it's incredibly important to ask these questions. I've realized it lately. I think we're busy with the things, but these things seem right. It seems like the right path, but you've never questioned your path. You were placed on it at one point, and you never realized that you're actually on a journey, and you have to be intentional about it. And it's incredible just to see these stages and the questions you have to ask yourself, just to check yourself, and then be intentional. So it's mind blowing. I think I'll need a week to debrief on just the questions alone. What are you facing at the moment? But that's all I want to say. I think we're very good at keeping busy with the things that seem important, but they have no value. So thanks, man.
Glory, gold, and girls.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah, exactly.
Glory, gold, and girls. Tom, is your hand up there? Yes, gemute, Tom.
Let me unmute myself. I think my hand was lifted up by accident. Okay. But let me ask anyway. The character of the jester really spoke to me, and it was an interesting thing. And then you've got your 3 G's: the girls, glory, and gold, and guys. What are some of the other diversions here, specifically for the kings? Like, I was thinking of misuse of power, but I was just wondering about what are some of the main diversions. The gesture obviously also speaks to the king, but
I think I think glory has to do with power as well, or could do with power, like getting drunk on power and control. And we often see that, like, where people just go nuts when they have power. And I think the jester also, for me, I really like the word amusement, because a muse is, we could talk about, maybe do a session on that sometimes. A muse is like something that's meant to inspire, like the mythical creature that comes and gives the writer or the artist the inspiration to write or create the work, right? So, and then, but if you put an A in front of it, it cancels out that. So amusement. So if you amusing yourself, you're actually taking away inspiration. Like, you're trying to, you're not allowing the mythical creature to inspire you so you can create all of that work. And I think that's something, like, when people tend to get older, they tend to, or they don't want to face the crisis. And I often see this, they don't want to face the crisis. So they fill their lives with more amusement. Like, you buy a bigger boat, you buy a bigger car, you buy a bigger this, you go on more trips, you go and do more stuff, because you're filling yourself with jesters. amusement. So the muse can't actually speak to you about what you need to build.
Yeah, I just want to say I heard how you pronunciated that during your talk. I really liked it. Amusement.
Yeah, I wanted to tell the story, and I looked at the time, and I was like, oh, I don't know if we're gonna have time for that story. But now,
Yeah, but thank you. Wonderful, wonderful talk.
Thanks, Tom. And it's Aneta, do you want to add
Yeah,
something?
I have
Yeah,
a quick question.
yeah,
Is
sure.
it possible in different areas in your life to be in different stages? Or are you for sure only in one of them?
I think that these stages are cyclical as well. I think that you move through them in different aspects of your. So I can just speak for myself. So I think that I have moved through my life so different aspects of my life have gone through this cycle. And in some aspects of my life, I'm still a child. And in other aspects of my life, I've gone on maybe onto king or elder stage, even in some stages. But and there's like a general kind of overarching theme to your life, or one that's the most pressing at this point. And I think so. The question here that I also asked at the end is like that if something jumps out at you, you go, oh shit, I'm so there, like I'm so at this stage. You can often there's like one that jumps out, and then when you sort of dig into it, you go, actually, well, it's actually a little bit more about this, and it's a little bit more about that, and this stage is about there, and so yeah. So a short answer, yes.
That's kind of how I felt. Like I might be in some areas in my life in the king stage, but in other areas I'm still a child. And yeah, in some ways even an elder, and then also the hero. So there's like all of them in there, but yeah, to figure out which one is the main one, I guess.
Yeah, I think all of us, like, you have to pay attention. So for me, I try to pay attention which one shows up. Like, where's my attention drawn? If I'm drawn, and it's so weird, like even in just watching films or picking books, if I'm picking books about heroes, like there's a reason that I'm doing that. Like there's a sort of a subconscious reason that I keep on picking those stories, because life is inviting me into something. When I feel myself reading books on kings and elders and that there's something else that's inviting. And even if, I mean, to get like really proper Jungian, you have to look at your dreams as well. What's showing up in your dreams? Is there like a queen showing up in your dreams, a king showing up in your dreams, or a jester, or what are those images? What is your soul, to use Thomas More's language, like what is your soul inviting you into at this point?
We also saw a big rise in the comic book hero world over the last 10 years. I mean, it feels like there's a massive need for the world. They feel like they want to be called out of the child phase into something that's more.
I wonder what that's about. Like there's a friend of mine actually sent me, it's a philosopher, I've forgotten his name now, in I think he lives in Canada somewhere, but like he did a series. It's like 52 episodes on YouTube that you can just go and watch. I'll share it on the group maybe later. I just need to go look for it. But it's like 52 episodes of an hour each, like lectures, and where he talks about consciousness and awareness. And I've watched the first 2 episodes, but one of the episodes is solely on superheroes. Like our obsession with superheroes. Why is our culture so obsessed with superheroes? And another one of the episodes is about zombies. Like why does our culture have this obsession with zombies? We keep on making zombie movies. So there must be something that's inside of us that's trying to kind of express itself. Because image always comes before word. So we make art before we can explain what the art is about.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Cool.
So Pierre, just on a practical note, I missed the first part. Where can I find the recording?
I'll download it now, and then I'll put it at the link and upload it again, and then put the link in an email, and I'll send it out to everyone.
Sure, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Go out tomorrow morning. And then if you're visiting and you want to join Palestra, ask your friend to help you get signed up.
Please do. You're missing out.
Yay! We have fun. Like Skalk, ek het nie eens gesien jy's daar nie. I'm so glad you're here. Awesome, dudes. Okay, I think that's it for today. Thank you guys so much for attending and
Thanks, Pierre.
asking questions and being here, being a part of this. It's so much fun for me, and I hope it's fun for you too. Lekker, have a
Thanks
good
so
one.
much, Pierre.
Thanks, man. Cheers. Thanks,
Bye.
man.
Thanks. Bye.